Well, everyone, we have Cietta on the line as promised. Cietta is one of the luminaries of the civic sphere. She has had a long history in voting rights, civic engagement, voter engagement, community engagement, you name it, Cietta's done it. She currently works as the director of let me get this right, Director of Engagement in the office of Senator Chuck Schumer.
That is correct.
And so welcome, Cietta. Thank you for joining Vote.org. Glad to see you here today.
Sorry for the technical difficulties. I really did have everything set up, even a nice new camera with lighting, and now it's all for naught. But thanks for having me, Andrea.
Not a problem. I think we're used to it. It happens to all of us at some point during a
Well, this is my very first IG Live, so I'll blame it on that.
Well, thank you for deciding to join Vote.org for your very first IG Live conversation.
Oh my God.
Well, let's dive right in.
Okay.
So I am lucky enough to be able to also call Cietta a friend. I have to say, her work has been phenomenal over the decades that she has spent doing voter engagement. And of course, right now, at the top of everybody's mind, we'll get there later in the conversation, but at the top of everybody's mind are the current voting rights bills and voting rights laws across America, and what's happening on the Hill. And, and I think that Cietta is really unique in her ability to address this conversation from several different vantage points. She's run programs on the ground. She's been in campaigns and elections for a long time. She's run a fund that supported other organizations on the ground. And now, of course, she's working within the halls of Congress. So every angle of this, Cietta has had an opportunity to see. So can you tell us a little bit, just run us through some of the work you've done in your life and getting to this point and how you got where you are?
Well, I love to say that I love to say that I'm not a Hill person, but everybody says that that's over. I've been there now for about 4.5 years. So I love to believe that I'm still an activist that is just on the Hill, helping advocate for groups on the ground. But I started my career over 20 years ago now at this point. I've done everything from work with labor unions and with political organizations, mostly doing campaign work, but obviously doing a lot of advocacy work. I helped build a lovely network. Folks have heard of State Voices, which helps do community-based organizing and civic engagement work across the country. When I started there were, I don't know, like 3 of us, and now they're in over 20 states and a staff that's like, 4 or 5 times that. And prior to coming to the Hill, I worked at a group called Democracy Alliance, where I ran a fund that was specifically designed to get Black leaders and Black organizations involved in politics, to get them funding specifically, which is often needed, and the resources, training, and tools so that they could run robust civic engagement programs. So that's a little bit about it. And then eventually I got lucky, or maybe not lucky, started working back on the Hill right as the administrations were changing. So a very different time when the Senate was, and the administration was completely run by Republicans, we were the minority, and have been fighting ever since. So it's been quite a ride over the last 4 years, and now we're moving a lot of policy. So, yeah.
And everyone, don't let Cietta fool you. Luck has nothing to do with it. She has a wide breadth of expertise, hard work, perseverance, and passion for, all things civic engagement. And so I think that that's probably, and well, you could add a dash of luck, but it's mostly all of.
You know what? I have to say, one, you don't get into civic engagement or even political work, or you don't do it for the big bucks. You don't do it a lot of times for a lot of I don't know, the prestige, I guess. I think there's a theory behind that. I mean, most of you have never heard of my name before. But I keep doing it because I feel like, well, there's a number of reasons. One, I truly believe in democracy as a way, and politics as a way to build power, particularly with communities of color, particularly with Black folks. In this country, the way that we affect change is really around two areas, this and economics. And so getting involved in civic engagement work is really important. And as much work as we've done and moved forward, I still think that there are very few voices that look like me, that sound like me, that are on the Hill. And so that drives me every day. And there's very small victories across the board, but every time you're able to help somebody, it makes a difference. So what keeps me in the fight?
Your office is, your position is a different kind of position than we've seen in the majority leader's office before. And can you tell me a little bit about it and about the expansion of your role inside of the leader's office, and then kind of what you think of that and what you hope to see for different senatorial offices in the future?
Absolutely. So traditionally the leaders' offices have what they call outreach. This is a little bit different because it was really designed to be much more of a, the title in its name is what it is, right? It is more strategic communications. It is directly engaging with groups, with advocates, with community leaders. We really, really try to build relationships with folks so that we're not transactional, right? I think oftentimes when people think of Capitol Hill, or they think of folks that work on the Hill, that we're very transactional. We call you when you need your vote or we need help with something. And what we've been trying to do over the last 4 years in the leader's office and the work that I do, because it was not a program that existed beforehand, was really have one-on-one intentional conversations. My boss will often say, there's a lot of things you can say about us, but inaccessibility is not one of those things. I think one of the other things is I really was trying to bring a lot of the organizing tactics that I've learned over the years to the office. So really having real thoughtful conversations, trusting conversations, honest conversations about policy, but also about the communities that we all care about.
Speaking of communities we all care about, can you tell me a little bit about just kind of, here we are setting the stage in the current fight for voting rights in our country. I think that a little bit of kind of what are some of the things that you've seen as a program head, as the manager of a fund, and now, on the Hill, what are some of the things, and of course we see it all the time at Vote.org too, but what do you see as some of the, challenges around voter suppression and kind of the history of where we've been as a country? Because what I want to do is take us through like where we've been and then where we are and then what we see rolling, in the future.
Well, I think it's interesting that, we're talking about S1 and HR1, and obviously it's incredibly timely given a number of the voter suppression laws that are moving across the country. But it's not as though those laws started moving in the last year. I mean, we had HAVA, I believe that was in 2004, Help America Vote Act, obviously to address a number of those issues. We've had court cases, many of them to help address it. Including the voter suppression pieces and the inaccessibility for voters is something that we've seen move for decades. I mean, since the history of this country. So I don't want to, we could go even further back, but I think it's interesting now that we're talking about the urgency of it. And I think it's because we're at a really pivotal moment in our democracy. I think, for me, it's really hard when people say that this is a partisan issue, because I can't imagine that we describe the right to vote, the ability to vote easily, as a partisan issue. It is our right. And so many people have fought so hard for it, and it is not something that's new. And I think if nothing else, we should be making it easier to vote right now, right? And so that's where, the work that Vote.org is doing is incredible to help make it easier and to sort of lift some of those barriers. I think most of my career I've been trying to help do that work. So, and hopefully that we'll get that moving in the Senate.
What do you see as, what are some of the current challenges, or actually we should go back for everyone and explain like what all does, are you excited about S1? Why? What all does it do in there? What are some of the pieces that you think are so pivotal, and what brings us to this like watershed moment? Because I think in political speak, we're always like, this is the time, this is
We
such an
do say
important
that a
moment.
lot, don't we? Yeah. So, there's a number of things, right? There's massive reforms on campaign finance, huge lifts on voting rights and accessibility around voter registration and automatic voter registration, things that I think folks have been trying to do. And I have to say, like, in the middle of a pandemic, I think it was very clear some of the challenges with our existing voting system, and I don't know that we would have noticed them as much, right? And I think it was an incredible opportunity because of the pandemic. We had to open things up a little bit more and figure out how we could make voting rights and everybody's right to vote a little bit easier. So there were, like you saw, the number of registrations online, the number of folks that were voting by mail. It is not a lack of interest or desire from our folks. It's the barriers that are created. And the system is somewhat flawed, and we know that, and we have to address them. I would say that the reason why it's so challenging now is because, and this is where I guess it does get political, when you lose an election, I think the general thing that folks do is say, they take a step back and they say, who are we talking to? What do we need to do to change? What is the message that didn't work? How do we help more folks, right? What do we need to do to adjust? And what happened and is happening right now are massive changes in the entire election system. Instead of fixing things and taking a step back, I think there is a discussion now about how we make it more difficult for certain populations to vote. And I think that that's happening at such a rapid pace. It's like the things that we've seen over the last decade or two are now increasing at such a fast rate over the last year. And some of them are so such nuisances, right? It doesn't even, it doesn't protect a voter. It doesn't make anything easier for folks. And so I think what we're hoping is that when we can, if we can, and we can fight and we can get S1 through, that we actually, slow down some of this so that we can, at a minimum, continue to protect our democracy and people's right to vote.
Absolutely. I like on the heels of historic voter turnout in this country and historic engagement among rising American electorate.
In the middle of a pandemic.
In the middle of a pandemic, something that should be like bring joy and celebration and make all of us, rejoice that everyone wants to participate in their democracy, that instead it's being met in the states with punitive measures meant to decrease the amount of people who can participate and specifically target specific parts of our electorate. And that's kind of like the scary thing. So I guess it's kind of wild to think that in the next few weeks, so much will be determined around voting rights, and so much. How do you describe to people the urgency of this moment?
Well, I think that I look at it as like, if you're watching what's happening across the country in Georgia and Arizona, in New Hampshire, I mean, pretty much every state where I think traditionally disenfranchised folks increase their turnout and their voting rates. I mean, there's no accident in that. If you're watching that, you understand that laws take a really long time to pass.
Yeah. And
laws take a really long time to implement, but they move much faster in states. And so the urgency for us really is that if these laws are enacted in the next, few months, if we're not successful, if we're not pushing to get F1 through, I think we're going to have a lot of challenges reversing a lot of these bad laws and these detrimental laws, right? So the urgency for us is getting it done as quickly as possible so that we can get things implemented, signed into law, and implemented as quickly as possible.
What can groups do, and then what can individuals do? Like, what kinds of
my favorite thing, because I feel like people feel like they're powerless watching this, and you're not. In fact, In every state, the way that you're organizing, members care more hearing from their own constituents than anybody else, right? So my boss, other members, other national folks that you think in DC, they could absolutely call these offices, and they do. But nothing matters more than you calling your own senator or your own member of Congress. That's the first step. And I also think people don't really understand how challenging these laws are or what voter suppression looks like and what it means, right? If it takes you 4.5 hours to vote, I mean, and you've had to stand in line that long. If some of these things that have where you can't bring somebody a bottle of water, or all of the many other barriers, and some of them, I actually can't even believe some of the laws that I've seen passed in the state. But if some of this passes, I think a lot of it is because people think this is about politics. And I think every individual who cares about our democracy, so every person that's listening right now or paying attention, has the ability to, and one, educate other folks that don't seem to understand what this can mean. Because it may not affect you immediately. That's the thing about somebody, right? Like, we always have a personal interest in it, and if it doesn't affect you immediately, it's like, well, what's the problem? But there's a slippery slope, and it always eventually changes the tenor of how our election laws and everything happens. So if we allow a lot of these things to happen, maybe not this cycle will it affect you, but believe that there will be other places, other things, other ways where elected officials feel like they can change laws that matter, like fundamental foundational laws that matter to this country. And that's where your voice matters too, is talking to them about that. So talking to your own family members, your own communities about it, educating them about why this is different, why voter ID laws are problematic, right? They seem innocuous in nature, but they're not, right?
So part of it's,
go ahead, I'm sorry. No, you go ahead.
So part of it's talking to your, realizing your own agency, talking to your representatives, calling them. And like, can you tell us, since you're on the inside, for everyone, these calls, they matter, right?
They
really
matter.
So how does that work inside some of these offices? The emails, the calls, it's like, there's a person who sees how many of those come in.
And the meetings, scheduling the meeting with either the staff in state or the members in state. It matters because they will always say, well, I didn't hear this from my constituents, or I'm hearing X, Y, and Z in opposition to this, right? So every time you call, we are paying attention, we are tracking it, we are listening to those calls. Every time you have a meeting with folks, that you schedule meetings, that matters. Every time you're talking to your other folks to get to the constituent meetings, that all matters. It's the silence that actually will let them know whether or not they can do something, right? And how they should be voting.
That's such an amazing point. It's the silence that lets them know. Like, if you're silent on it, that's also saying something to them.
Correct.
It makes them less likely to take action because they don't think their constituents care. So if somebody's lucky enough to get a meeting with somebody who's in staff,
well, let me say this. I feel like, and there are groups like Vote.org and a number of others that are working to get folks. So I would venture to like reach out to your organization. And I know you've already got this set up where you're helping with the coalition. I'm not plugging Vote.org. I just know that there are avenues where you can do that, and Vote.org is one of them.
Where you can plug Vote.org. We love to hear it.
Well, no, but if you're interested, you can actually sign up for a lot of them. The town halls, the meetings, they're looking for people who want to sit in these meetings, particularly in tough states where we don't have, large population of folks that necessarily are paying attention to F1 or are voting right now. So I would, go to their websites. I'm happy to do it, but I'm sure you guys have already got it set up. Go to Vote.org's website and actually sign up and say that you're interested, and then they can connect you to places where you can call and also to help them. It is not easy as an individual constituent sometimes, but I feel like there are a lot of organizations that help manage that, and happy to help send those resources out if you'd like.
Fantastic. And when people do get connected, one of the things, come to Vote.org, sign up through Vote.org. We will definitely send out actions and things that you can do. We have a Vote.org/action page, things that people can take to help protect democracy in this moment, because really it is an all hands on deck moment, and we all need to, it's not about red and blue, like Cietta said, it's about red, white, and blue. It's about our country and our ability to vote and our ability to move forward. And then if you are talking to staffers like Cietta, make sure you ask. Make sure you say, like, I haven't asked. My ask is that you protect democracy.
I think that's right.
Is that right?
I think that's right. I think that, look, you make the ask and have the meeting, do the calls. It is one of the easiest ways to get involved and for your voice to be heard outside of voting. It's the next step after voting, right? So I'm assuming that if you're paying attention to this, you probably voted in the last election. I don't think there's any inactive voters on here, but if it is, this is the next step in your activism. So you should reach out and do it. I think it's really incredibly important. And I do feel like there is an urgency within the next month or two for you guys to do that, for folks that are listening to do that.
Cietta, what keeps you going day in, day out? Voting rights fight after voting rights fight, you've done work to all across, in your current role, all across the board on every issue, everything that so many people care about out there. What keeps you going and sustained, and what gets you excited? Where do you find hope in this environment? What's your positive?
So there's a couple of places. One, I'm incredibly lucky to be surrounded by a lot of wonderful women in this movement who are brilliant and talented, particularly women of color, Black women, who have been not only encouraging to me, but I think that are leading the way. And that encourages me. But also, I have to say, look, every election is an opportunity. And I was incredibly encouraged on election night to see the numbers of folks that turn out. I mean, I've been working my whole career to see those sort of record numbers, particularly in the Black community. And we do not have a lot of victories in this work. It is very difficult. But when you do, and you see a path forward, I think there's nothing better than that. And so every time somebody's like the light bulb goes off, or we're able to push some bit of policy that didn't seem possible. I mean, I'm not going to go too past like S1 on this, but there have just been so many changes in the last 3 to 6 months that I've seen that I never thought I would see. So that keeps me encouraged that there are some bright lights in this work, and we just have to keep trying.
That makes sense. Yeah, keep trying, keep getting up every day, keep hitting it hard. Cietta, it is so wonderful to speak with you, and thank you for taking time out of your day. And I hope that you'll come back and do another.
Now that I figured out technology, I will absolutely come back and do this again. And thank you for having me. And thanks everybody for paying attention to IG. I didn't even know. I sound like my boss now, which what are we now? We're Zennials. I don't know how I'm describing myself.
We're Catalano millennials.
Catalano.
Right? Catalano millennials. We are not geriatric. That was a terrible term. I don't know who came up with it.
Yeah, I'm never going to use that. So I'll happily come back. And as we get closer to it, if you want updates, I'm happy to do that as well.
We would love to have more, to do updates and to have you, come talk to us as S1 moves forward, and as, as all these issues kind of heat up in June. It would be an honor. So thank you.
Thank you.